Welcome everyone to the last lecture of this class for spring 2023. We are now done with this class. I think next week you guys get a week off, don't you? Yeah, and then the next class that starts is April 10th, I think, will be the next class start. So I'm glad that you all made it to the very end of spring 20. I love spring. For me, spring is my favorite season because the sun comes out. You know, I don't like the fall. So let's start with today's lecture on, well, actually we're going to be doing compound sentences. We're going to do a little bit of sentence structure. We're going to go over different kinds of introduction, different kinds of body paragraphs, different kinds of conclusions. And then we're done. Now, I think that I've already made separate videos about that, and I think I might have posted that to the announcements already. But in the next semester, I have to redo all the lectures because they changed the classroom. So this is the last semester of this classroom. Oh, I don't mind because that way it's something different, you know. So let's start sharing. And do you have any questions about your assignments or anything like that? Anything general before we start? No. Okay. So here is sharing here. So here we have today's lecture, and we're going to be reviewing, we're going to do APA mistakes that people have made, compound complex sentence, we're going to do comparison, contrast, transition words, different kinds of introduction paragraphs, different kinds of body paragraphs, and different kinds of conclusion. Then we're going to do revision versus proofreading. And by the way, when you make a oral presentation, this agenda should show up as either your first or second slide, okay? Then the second slide would be APA mistakes. Then your next slide talks about compound complex sentences. Your slide after that will talk about transition words. Then your next slide will talk about introduction. So basically this is like a table of contents. Your first or second slide are your table of contents, and then these become your body slides for an oral presentation. So that's how we would do a PowerPoint. If you have you done that before?
No, but
Yes,
I'll
I
do it
did
next
one.
quarter.
Yes, and I got a yes and a no. So that's basically what if I were to transition this into a PowerPoint, that's what I would do. But this agenda would remain the same, except all of these are different slides. So that's just like introduction, body paragraph, and conclusion. So here are some APA mistakes that I've seen students make. Let's see. So here, I can't wait to be an adult. And so you notice that here, there's not one APA. Where would you put an APA in any of this? When do we use APA?
Like when we're citing things, uncommon knowledge, dates, times, percentages.
Exactly. So here, as soon as I turned 18, I was officially an adult. And also in the past, I used to allow students to write all about themselves. But then I realized that, well, if they're going to be writing research papers, so you're the first class I started with experimenting by having all of you say, John Smith, or in your case, Sarah, remembered as a child, she used to always dream that she wanted to be growing up. After high school, Sarah enrolled in, you get the idea. So in other words, now I'm having students write about themselves in the third person case, so that when you write about case studies, because some students are not yet nurses. Now if you're already a nurse, writing a case study is as natural as for the policeman writing his case report. So here you have students making a mistake like the majority of school-age children go straight to work every other weekend and make about $200 every other week. Of course, when we have any kind of numbers, we have to put in a in-text citation. Then we put in our reference citation at the end of our post. Here, if you're going to have any kind of medical facts, here people struggle. Most people having depression also have some type of anxiety disorder. So here you need to cite where you got that from. And here they talk about chemicals in someone's brain. And so here you have, this is a medical fact, Smith 2022. This is a paraphrase, so you don't need quotation marks. and you just need the author and the date. Both of you are doing really well with your APA. And so here therapy is more effective, whereas mediation can be addictive. And so so these are actual mistakes that I got from students' posts, that people were missing their APA. And then here, this particular student only gave me web addresses. This student actually did it correctly. Here, she put in her in-text citation. So this student did it correctly and had correct. So notice how your reference citation and your in-text citation should match. So you have Radford here and Zeif. So that means that if I go into the references, I should be seeing a Radford and a Zeif. So always your reference citation and in-text citation needs to match. So here, let's see, that's about it. I think this person also had it correct. She has her in-text citation, which is Mackinson, and here she did not put in Mackinson. So for APA, we cite the following: statistics, percentages, prices, hours, numerical data, historical data, scientific data, medical data, population data, any kind of unknown knowledge that Americans are not familiar with. But that I did. And then the direct quote is when you cite word per word what the author says. You use quotation marks, author, date, page number. And then paraphrase quote, you summarize the direct quote in your own words. And you have author and date. When you write your reference citation, you have the author, last name, first name, date, article name, publication, date you retrieved the website, and web address. Some good sources for APA is www.apa.org, or you can Google APA auto generator. Have you used the auto generators, the APA auto generators?
I did. It just wasn't. Whenever I cited from a website, it didn't sometimes give me either the author or the year.
Yeah.
You're just supposed to put in the author and the year, and then it goes into the. But it depends. There's so many different kinds of auto generators. There's EasyBib. I forget what's EasyBib.net. I can't remember what the names of them were. Anyway, so then we studied Kapow, and this is how we can tell that something is a credible source. So C stands for current, A stands for author, P stands for purpose, objective, and writing style. And then we only use sources from .edu, .org, or .gov. And the Purdue OWL Library is an excellent source for everything. Have you used the Purdue OWL Library?
Not yet.
And if you go ahead.
For figuring out APA citations, or just APA formatting.
Yes. So the latest, and also if APA has changed and added new, especially with ChatGPT. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's the new AI that came last November. And so now I think that the APA is going to have to figure out, how do you cite ChatGPT? That's because it just came out. So whenever there are updates to APA, you can go to the Purdue Library, or you go to apa.org, which is their official website, okay, in order to find the latest updates. And so what is an annotated bibliography? I don't think we went over that here. Did we? No. What is so when you start writing long research papers, then you need an annotated bibliography. Basically, you have your list of references, and then you put a summary of the article. After you put your reference citation, then you put a summary of that article, then another reference citation, and then another summary of that article. Why would you do this? Well, if you're going to have 80 different sources for your paper, and you're not going to remember all 80 sources, so that's why we would have a summary. That way you could keep track of which is which. So think of it as like index cards. So that's why we would use an annotated bibliography for you to keep track, for you and the reader to keep track of what the different articles that you sourced. I remember for my master's degree, I had 88 pages of reference citations. And for 5 years running, my master's thesis had the thickest bibliography until someone broke the record 5 years after me. So then I'm talking about UCLA graduate students. That's what my professor said, because I can read really fast. So an annotated bibliography, so your summary should just be about 150 words, and it's usually a descriptive and an evaluative paragraph. And the purpose of the annotation is to perform, to inform. Here's an example, Rashford. And so here I took it from my other school where students are required to have annotated bibliography. So this is the article, a reference citation. Then you would say Rashford talks about why it is important for the United States to have a universal health care system that is free and available to all U.S. citizens so that everyone has access to basic medical care. This study is a literature review of 5 other research studies on this topic. So that's how you would, yes.
Is this at the end of your paper, like
Yes.
where you put all your references, but you
Yes.
just add in a little
Yes.
excerpt of your
Yes.
list?
Yes,
Okay.
so this is what I did for 88 pages. And it's also known as a literature review, okay? And actually it depends on your paper. Some departments want you to put your annotated bibliography like the 3rd chapter of your paper. So sometimes it's not at the end of your paper, sometimes it's like around the 3rd chapter. And so it depends on each department, okay? And some departments want you to put it at the end of the paper, some want you to put it in the middle of your paper. And so therefore, when you start going to graduate school, your professor will tell you this is the structure of your master's paper you have to follow. So that's why when I was doing last week's how to write a science paper, some schools, basically you do have the abstract, then you have the background and purpose of the problem, then you have your methods, then you have your discussion, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. But some departments will combine discussion and conclusion together into one paragraph. So basically, and each department has it slightly differently. Oh, that's the basic structure of a social science paper. So when I say social science, that includes nursing, okay? Nursing, linguistics, business, all that's, you guys, we all use APA. So I majored in linguistics, so here Zeev talks about the pros and cons of universal health care. He discusses both the advantages and disadvantages of universal health care. And although Zeev discusses both sides of this issue, Zeev feels that the U.S. needs a universal healthcare system to encourage American people to stay healthier for the long. So obviously this person was doing a paper on universal healthcare, and these are like 2 of the references. But in this class, we don't use an annotated bibliography. I think this I took from, anyway, so that's an annotated bibliography that you could use when you write a longer than three sources. Most people can keep track of the 3 sources, but if he goes beyond 3 sources, because the human brain can only do 3, and then after that it goes poof. So how to revise your comparison contrast essay. First you revise for your essay structure first. Then once you make sure your essay structure, that's known as revision. Then once revision is revising for just essay structure, once your essay structure is good, then you do proofreading. In other words, grammar, APA formatting, and in-text citation. So that's how you, for week 12, for those of you who still haven't handed in your week 12, don't wait till the last minute, because this week you only have until Friday to hand everything in. Not Sunday, Friday. So I still have students who forget and still be handing things in on a Sunday. And by that time, I've already submitted final grades, because at midnight on Friday, I will submit final grades, because final grades is due Saturday morning, very early in the morning. And I like to sleep in on my Saturday mornings. So therefore, at the stroke of midnight, just like when Cinderella loses her outfit, that's when I submit final grades and it's over. So if you hand it in at 12:30, after I've submitted final grades, you've got to go to my boss to ask permission. Can I still hand it in? And most likely she'll probably say, no, the 0 stays. You're supposed to do it before midnight, unless you have an emergency, like somebody went to the ER or something like that. If it's like I overslept, That's not good either. That's not good enough. No emergency, no extension. So after midnight, I no longer have the authority to give you extensions. That's basically what I'm saying. Then it goes to my boss, and they decide if you get, so pretty much they say no, because, you have to learn, my other faculty, they teach nursing. When you're a nurse, this is the faculty saying, when you become a nurse, you have to learn deadlines. I have to remind my students, in the real world, that deadlines have life-death consequences, or something. And as you're a nurse already, Sarah, you know that really, really well. But there are some students who haven't become nurses yet. So that's what I was at a meeting, and that's what she said. Some nursing teacher said. Anyway, so we're going to do the compound complex sentence. And so in this class so far, we've only done the simple sentence, the compound sentence, and the complex sentence. So basically, a compound complex sentence is when we combine the compound sentence together with a complex sentence into one sentence. And in English, the compound complex sentence is the most complex sentence you can have, and which is only about 3 lines. So let's go over sentence structure. So if you know good sentence structure, this is a review of your week 7 quiz. So if you have good sentence structure, you can avoid sentence fragments in your essay. And so a simple sentence, what is a simple sentence? You tell me, since we've done this before, so I'm not going to reteach or reinvent the wheel. So Sarah, what is a simple sentence?
So if you've got like the subject, so like say if I was, if I threw a ball, you got subject, verb, and an object.
Okay,
so it's just very, very short.
All right,
to the point.
Good. And then Sam, what is a compound sentence?
Whenever you use families?
Yes,
whenever it has 2 conjunctions or 2 sentences together.
Joined by families. Yes, that's a good way of explaining. So yes, you have Jack gets good grades, and you must always have a comma. 4, he studies hard. Jack is tall, but Mary is short. Fanboys stands for and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And the word compound simply means 2. Okay, so therefore if I say compound sentence, then I mean 2 sentences. So here you have 2 sentences. And going back to Sarah, what is a complex sentence?
It's basically we've got 2 independent clauses, or an independent and a dependent clause.
That's correct.
Together.
Yes. So when you combine a dependent clause with an independent clause together, then you have a complex sentence. And so these are all, what kind of conjunctions are these?
Subordinate.
Okay. Why are they known as subordinating conjunctions?
Because they add to the sentence.
And then what do they do? They add to the sentence, and then what? Week 7 quiz. You should know all of this. It's like
I was so on you at this point.
Did they make it more complex, the sentence, whenever we add them?
No.
It brings those 2 dependent clauses and the independent clause together, like it meshes them together, because you can't have.
Okay, so that's one of its functions, but that's not its main function, but it's one of the functions. Okay, what else? Why do we call it dependent and independent?
Because
Because
for an independent clause to decide by itself, but a dependent clause needs an independent clause.
So what renders an independent clause dependent? How do we create a dependent clause?
When it doesn't have like a subject?
No. That's a different topic. That's reducing adjective clauses and reducing adverb clauses. I do have that on my Professor H channel, in which I talk about how you reduce clauses. Especially if you have two something of the same subject, you can reduce the clause, but that's not this particular grammar point. So basically, these are all known as subordinating conjunctions, and when we put these subordinating conjunctions in front of a sentence, we render it a dependent clause. That's what I was looking for. So if I just say John eats dinner, That's an independent clause. But if I put after John eats dinner, then that makes it a dependent clause. And so how can we know what is a subordinating conjunction? We remember it as all, woo, boo, ease. After, although, where, while, but, unless. I can't remember what the other U is, since I don't use this. I is if, and S is so that. Anyway, so you remember it using this. Here, I wrote it. And, after, while, when, where, before, unless, until, if, since. So this is one way of remembering all the subordinating conjunctions. So if you want to have sentence variety in your essay, so instead of just saying Jack gets good grades for he studies hard, you could say while Jack gets, even though Jack gets, because Jack gets good grades, because Jack studies hard, Jack gets good grades, for instance. So because is a subordinating conjunction. So you have different kinds of sentences mixed in your essay. You can have some simple sentences, some compound sentences, and some complex sentences. And then if you Google yourself subordinating conjunctions, you can also use or create your own complex sentences. So that means that dependent clause is less important than an independent clause. So if you're a writer, you don't want to emphasize after John eats dinner, he goes to bed, that sort of thing. Whereas if I want to say John gets good grades for he studies hard. And so both sentences have equal importance, whereas if I use a complex sentence, the subordinating conjunction is less important than the main sentence. And why is this important? You as the writer decide how you want your sentences, how do you want your reader to read it? Do you want your reader to say, John eats dinner and he goes to bed? Or do you want the reader to read, after John eats dinner, he goes to bed? So writers vary their sentence structure in order to tell the reader how to read the sentence in order to make some point. He goes to bed and finds a giant spider that eats his face. Okay? So therefore, after John eats dinner, it's not very important that he just ate his dinner. What's important is he went to bed and a giant spider ate his face. Okay? So then, as a creative writer, and then you, after John eats dinner, he took his vaccine and therefore now it will not be hospitalized for COVID-19. So you want to emphasize a particular point. That's how you would do it. Okay. So the reason why I made that example is, I could see Sarah going, I'm not going to be writing creative stories. I'm a nurse. You see? So I said, you want to emphasize the fact that a certain treatment is important. Then you could use, that's why I changed it to something medical, even though it sounded really weird. Anyway, so if the subordinating conjunction is at the beginning of the sentence, you use a comma. If the subordinating conjunction is at the end of the sentence, you don't use a comma. And so here the words in the table and both are all subordinating conjunctions. And so this is the comma rule for all subordinating conjunctions except WWWT, who, what, where, when, that, which, relative clauses. Then when you have the subordinating conjunction at the beginning of the sentence with WWT, then you have two commas, and if it comes at the end of the sentence, if the subordinating conjunction comes at the end of the sentence, you just have one comma. So here the comma rule changes. Okay, then that's why I wrote WWWT. So that's the exception to the rule of one comma at the beginning and then no comma at the end. And then here with these relative clauses, you have two at the beginning and one at the end. When I said it that fast, did you understand? This should all be from week 7. Yeah. So anyway, what's new for here is we're going to combine compound and complex sentences together. So as the name suggests, a compound complex sentence brings both of these sentence forms together, so that in a compound complex sentence, you have two sentences that have a dependent clause, basically. So if I say, Mary is rich, that's a simple sentence. Mary is rich, but John is poor, compound sentence. So if I say, and then while Mary is rich, John is poor, that's a complex sentence. So here, if I say, Mary is very rich, but John is very poor. Okay, so in this one sentence, you have that compound sentence. Then if I add, Mary, who is French, is very rich, but John, who is American, is very poor. So notice how I added a dependent clause to these compound sentences. Now it becomes a compound complex sentence. Okay, and so that is that if you try to add anything more, like you try to add another, and Roger, who is Polish, is not very poor, but somewhat poor, while John is, well, not John, well, Robert, if you try to add any more sentences beyond this, in English, it becomes awkward and too long. Now, if you're speaking...
like a run-on sentence?
Yes, it becomes run-on sentence. But if you're speaking French or Spanish, it's perfectly acceptable to keep adding and adding and adding and adding. You can add pages and pages and have an 88-page sentence, and that's still considered correct in other languages. Yes. So like I think there is a book that has 100 pages and it's just one sentence. I can't remember the name of the book in French. I think it's Marcel Proust was very famous for writing really long sentences. Yet in French, that is considered okay. You can do that. To be long-winded like that. But that's why a lot of my French and Spanish students make sentences that are way too long. And then I have to tell them, this is as long as it gets, you know, and then they would say, oh yeah, that's because that's English. English is just very linear, okay, out of all of the language. That's why English is so easy to do. And so if you have three simple sentences like this, Lupe is a great student. She went to school a long time ago. She is reviewing her grammar. Now we have the same subject for three different sentences. That, if you do that, it makes your essay too choppy. So if you have the same subject in 3 different or 4 different sentences, think about combining them into either a compound sentence or a compound complex sentence. This is how you give your essay sentence variety. So here I would combine the Lupe, I call them the Lupe sentences. Lupe, who was a great student, went to school a long time ago and is reviewing her grammar. And that way you have Lupe here and it's not a run-on sentence. Actually, I can actually get rid of she is reviewing her grammar if I wanted to. Here is another example. John likes to eat, John likes to sleep, and I would write John, who likes to eat, likes to sleep, but Mary likes to eat instead of sleeping. So this is an example of a compound complex sentence. Same thing here. Erin loves her brother loves her too, her brother pays the bills. So Erin loves her brother and he loves her too because she pays his bills. I would love someone to pay my bills too. But anyway, that's beside the point. So here you have a compound complex sentence because you have Erin loves her brother and he loves her too. That's the compound sentence. And then because she pays his bills, that is the subordinating conjunction that renders it a complex, compound complex sentence. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Though my mother says it doesn't matter, I am tall and she is short. This is also a compound complex sentence because though my mother says it doesn't matter, this is a subordinating conjunction. Then you add the subordinating conjunction to the 2 compound sentences and you have compound complex. So basically, a compound complex sentence is simply a matter of adding a dependent clause to a compound sentence. That's it. That's all it is. So that's the only one that wasn't on your week 7 quiz, which meant that that's the only one I didn't go over because it wasn't on your week 7 quiz. Your week 7 quiz only went over the first 3, the simple, compound, complex. So I figured that for week 12, why not? I'll add in compound complex. I didn't exactly follow the syllabus. I kind of went off, but as long as I cover everything that's already on the syllabus, I think I covered that and some, and that sort of thing. And no one seems to mind that, as long as I cover what's in your textbook, which I did. So here are some examples of, you have a simple sentence, complex sentence, compound sentence. So tell me, Sarah, why is the first one a simple sentence?
They're not connected at all. It just has the subject, the storms, and
Yes.
then verb, let's see, cause, and then an object. Or wait, no, subject, verb.
Yeah, got it right, yes. Subject is severe storms, caused is the verb, a record number of, of tornadoes, subject, verb, object. Can you believe that in Los Angeles we actually had a tornado for the first time in like 50 years? And we had trees going down here. And yes, last night, so yeah, here you have two different simple sentences, and they're pretty much the same subject, mainly talking about severe storms. So if you have the same subject, you can combine them either as a complex sentence or as a compound sentence. If you combine these two sentences as a complex sentence, then one sentence is less important than the other sentence. If you combine it as a compound sentence, both sentences mean the same thing. So that's how come you get to decide as the writer whether you want it as complex or compound. Then when I put everything together, it becomes compound complex. So here, although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, that is the subordinating conjunction, cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. So dependent clause plus independent clause is a complex sentence. The severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes. So that's one independent clause, fanboys. And then you have another independent clause, compound. Now, compound complex is simply a compound sentence with a dependent clause. So although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause, and next year should see fewer, less severe storms. And therefore, by adding in, although you have the dependent clause, although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, so that's the dependent clause. Then you have the compound sentence. Cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause, and next year should see fewer temperatures. So that's the compound sentence with its dependent clause, which becomes a compound complex sentence. And when I was young, we used to diagram all of this. We used to draw it in roots. And as we diagrammed it, then we got to learn, so that's the dependent clause. That is so if you like to visualize it, you can draw it as a diagram, and then that helps you visualize sentence structure. So we know that if I simply said, although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, period. Is that a complete sentence? No. So anytime, if I go back here, if all I do is go, after John eats dinner, period. Is that a complete sentence? No. So I still get people who write like that, unless he is sick, period. Okay? So I get a lot of sentence fragments. So once you understand sentence structure, this is what I write in everyone's feedback, like forever. If you study sentence structure, you know your sentence structure, you can avoid sentence fragments. So that's a very common feedback. And so that's why it's important to know sentence structure. Why is it important to know sentence structure? I just said it.
To know, I mean that, and to see how you're gonna make your reader see the importance of each sentence.
Yeah. You determine determine how your reader reads the sentence in order to determine your style of writing. You see, so that all has to do with writing style, which has to do with creative writing, which is such a fun class to teach, because then I go much deeper of many different kinds of sentences, many different nuances, and so on and so forth, that you're not interested in learning poetry and all that kind of stuff, so we skip that. So anyway, so we did compound contrast sentences. So for your coordinating, for your comparison contrast essay, you don't have to keep saying as a child, as a child, as a child, as a child. So I will tell the other students who have not yet handed in their week 12, if you're doing childhood versus adulthood, and if I see as a child, as a child, as a child, as an adult everywhere, you're going to lose points. You should go back and review my week 8. That was the whole reason why I did it, so that you have different ways of saying, and don't say but, so. Okay, that also sounds so second grade. So here, of course, if you're in second grade, that's fine. But here, different ways of saying but. Okay, so don't use.
That way transition word.
These are the transition words.
That really helped me. Like,
Yeah, same.
It did all different ways of saying but and. So instead of saying and, yeah. Therefore, moreover, furthermore, different ways of saying and. So here, I think these are all different ways of saying but. So now we're going to go into different kinds of introduction paragraphs. We're going to leave transition words and compound complex sentences behind. Everybody got it? All right. So far, I've been teaching you the funnel introduction paragraph. So in the funnel introduction paragraph, you start out general, and then you put your thesis statement at the very end, and your thesis statement is specific. And so in a funnel introduction paragraph, for instance, you would say, America is a throwaway. Who wants to read this? Sam is begging me to read this, so why don't you read it?
No, okay.
So from the whole thing?
Okay.
Yeah.
America is a throwaway society.
From both industrial and municipal sources, the United States generates about 10 billion metric tons of solid waste per year. Every 5 years, the average American discards, directly and indirectly, an amount of waste equal in weight to the Statue of Liberty.
Then we put in our in-text citation because we said 10 billion and 5 years, any kind of number, and you need to put in an in-text citation. Go ahead.
We don't read it, right? Like the citation, right?
Yeah, and so basically then the rest of these sentences, which if you don't want to read it, basically talks about that one in-text citation. So this one in-text citation is 10 billion, well, we're very wasteful. And then here we are very wasteful and we end up putting everything into landfills, and we need to find a way to reuse all that. So as I start talking, I'm starting to get to my point. We're very wasteful, so therefore we need to find a way to recycle, because recycling is actually the topic. So I'm getting more and more. That's the only way to reuse garbage is through recycling. Now I get to my thesis statement. Because recycling garbage saves the environment, because plastic water bottles can be reused, less garbage ends up in landfills, and future generations will be able to enjoy an earth that is less polluted with garbage. And so that is, so when we write something before the thesis statement, we're building up to the thesis statement. We're giving your thesis statement context. And so that's why the 3 parts of your introduction so far is hook, 5 background sentences, and the thesis statement. So that is a funnel introduction paragraph. That's all I've taught you so far. Now, another common approach is what we call the turnabout. Can you hear the siren? We have so many fires in California. Yeah. So another common approach is what we call the turnabout. This type of introduction opens with a few sentences summarizing a point of view that is actually the opposite of the writer's own point of view. So in a turnabout sentence, you write about whatever your topic is. You start out with the other person's point of view, and then you pivot and say, but actually, in reality, and that becomes your thesis statement. So your thesis statement becomes the rebuttal of whatever it is you wrote on top. Therefore, you do an exact turnabout of whatever you're writing about. This is a very dramatic way to showcase your thesis statement. It's also a way in which you show that you know what the other side is thinking, and you can rebut the weaknesses of the other side's argument. So this gives your paper a more balanced feel. This is one of the ways in which you can use a counter argument and a rebuttal paragraph all within one paragraph. So I'm teaching you the easiest way to use a counter argument and a rebuttal. If you want to learn the other ways, then you have to take another writing class. The whole writing class just teaches you many different ways of argumentation, many different ways of writing a turnabout. Okay, so I'm just going to teach you one basic just for this class, because that's what I do in 101. It's 105, which you guys don't have. So first, so you talk about the other side. Many young people think smoking is glamorous. After all, young people see celebrities smoking in movies. Old-time movies feature Betty White and Cary Grant smoking and looking very glamorous. And as a result, young people associate smoking with maturity, elegance, good health, and sophistication. Reynolds cigarette company even offers strawberry chocolate flavored vapes in order to entice young people or even children to smoke. And young people come away with the idea that if they're using electronic smoking and the vapor is all water vapor, it's totally harmless. However, now I pivot to by using however, in contrast. In reality, there's a whole bunch of transition words, and then you transition to your thesis statement. However, smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. So this is called a turnabout because you make a complete turnabout of whatever you were saying. And so this is a dramatic way in which you can introduce your thesis statement. Another way, you got that? Yeah. Another way is known as dramatic entrance. A dramatic entrance uses a story. Okay, so let's say I'm using the same thesis statement. Smoking causes lung cancer, smoking causes lung cancer, throat cancer, and stomach cancer. So instead of having a turnabout, I will use a story. Betty sits in her wheelchair with a tube sticking out of her throat. As a nurse, you would know this already. She now uses that tube for breathing since her lung and nose cancer has eroded and destroyed her nasal passages. After 60 years of smoking, Betty has terminal nose and throat cancer. However, she does not want anybody else to suffer this sad fate, especially her grandchildren. She waits patiently as the cameraman prepares the camera for the most important "just say no" smoking ad. The cameraman motions her to speak. Betty starts to speak. "My name is Betty Smith. I began smoking at the age of 14. Now I am dying a horrible slow death due to lung cancer. I no longer have a nose to breathe out of, and now my voice has been destroyed. I do not have much more time to live. So please do not start smoking if you want to avoid my fate. Just say no when somebody offers a cigarette to you." And as the commercial closes, Betty breathes a sigh of relief that maybe she has saved a life. Then at the end of the commercial, it says, Betty died 3 days after making the commercial. Actually, it's a true story. On TV, it's somebody named Laura who died at 53 or something like that. Yeah, and so it's all over. So then your thesis statement, then you pivot to, indeed, smoking is harmful to one's health because smoking causes lung cancer, throat cancer, and stomach cancer. So as you can see, this is known as a dramatic entrance because you make a dramatic entrance by writing a story about it. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. And then the last kind, I left out circular. What happened to, okay. So that's basically it. So here you have the funnel, the turnabout, and dramatic entrance. So 3 different kinds of introduction paragraphs. Now we've got different kinds of body paragraphs. So in body paragraphs, there are 4 major body paragraphs: narrative, descriptive, expository, and persuasive. And so the body paragraph can be used to describe or explain an endless variety of things. So an expository body paragraph gives information about a subject. And so here you are writing an expository paragraph when you are writing any paragraph to back up, describe, illustrate the main thesis. You are also providing information to back up the thesis, or you are providing information to back up the topic sentence. So expository is any kind of, if I say climate change involves the warming of the temperatures. So I'm just informing the reader of the topic. So that is a expository because you're exposing the truth, hence the word expository. A narrative body paragraph is when you talk and base it on your life. So you talk about events based on your own life. So a narrative paragraph tells a story. And then you see examples of a narrative paragraph with the dramatic entrance, in which the writer uses a story from her life to introduce the thesis. Persuasive body paragraph is when you want to convince the reader of your point of view. We did that in week 9. Descriptive paragraph in week 3 when we did our food game. So those are the 3 or 5 different kinds of body paragraphs. Conclusion paragraph, now that I haven't done. We did mainly body paragraphs. So far, I've only taught you summary paragraph, conclusion paragraph. In a summary conclusion paragraph, that is the simplest and most common form of conclusion. In this format, you simply restate the thesis in the first sentence, and then you summarize the main points of your essay and end with a strong final sounding statement. And so a summary paragraph is so far what you've been writing. Smoking causes, so here I repeat the thesis statement as the first sentence. Smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. People who smoke have a higher chance of getting these cancers. Smoking has harmful cancer-causing ingredients like nicotine, which destroys the lungs, stomach, and throat. People who smoke all their lives end up with a tube in their throat, or COPD also. And so do not be fooled by the celebrities and the glamorous movies. Smoking is not good for one's health. Avoid smoking or vaping at all costs. Notice how I replaced your health with one's health. That's how you replace you and your with third person case. Quit smoking as soon as possible. So that is a summary conclusion paragraph. A recommendation conclusion paragraph, that's what you use in business letters. So unlike your academic essay, in a business letter or when you do an oral presentation, we want to write a recommendation conclusion. That is called a call to action conclusion paragraph, where you want to tell the reader a call to action, what to actively do to solve the problem. You want to suggest possible changes that can be implemented to improve the situation. So what actions can you propose that your readers take to solve the problem? And so we went over that when we went over Martin Luther King, where he told the readers, get up off your couch and go out and protest against racism. Okay, so that a recommendation conclusion tells you, makes you care about the topic so much that it makes you get off your couch and do something about it. So and that's why in business, why do we use a call to action in business letters? Because we want people to buy our product. We don't just want people to just sit there and go like, and we spend all this money on a commercial and nobody buys our product. Well, then we would be a very lousy marketing company, you see. Nobody would hire us. So a recommendation conclusion would be like, smoking causes all of these cancers. So you're telling people, quit smoking. Don't go consult your doctor. If you find ways to quit, join a support group. Take nicotine gum and quit smoking. So here you're telling readers to do something about quitting smoking, you see. So you're not just summarizing your essay like here, I would say people who smoke have a higher chance of getting these cancers. You're actually telling people to do something about it. So that's known as a recommendation conclusion. A prediction conclusion, is that too fast? Is that good? Okay.
No,
so
you're good.
A prediction conclusion means that you want to predict into the future what will happen if the reader takes these actions. So here you would say smoking causes all these cancers, but once you quit smoking, you will be able to lead a healthier life. So instead of saying you can say once people quit smoking, people will be able to lead a healthier life. People can live to see their children get married. People can get rid of their smoker's cough. People will be able to breathe easier and exercise more. People won't have to worry that their secondhand smoke will harm their children and their wife. And people don't have to leave the building to go outside. One thing you've noticed is people. What can be done to make this less choppy? For the most part, it all has pretty much the same people. Sound very...
like those who or...
Yes, correct. Yes, we can connect some of these. Once a person quits smoking, they will lead a whatever. Okay, I have to sit down and rewrite it. But basically, you use relative clauses: who, which, where, when, and combine it together so that we don't. And also, we'd get rid of you, your, and we could combine. We would say the reader can live to see their children get married, or you could say people, one, person, or Americans. In other words, use a specific noun to replace you and your, so that you have third person case, and then you sound more professional. That's how we replace you and your. A lot of students have so much trouble. Simply replace you and your with the reader. Once the reader quits smoking, the reader will be able to lead a healthier life. The reader can live to see their children get married. Okay, so that's another trick. If you can't think of which pronoun to use, you can also know what is your audience. If your audience are other Americans, if your audience are other teachers, you could say nurses can do nurses can replace you. So you is who is your audience, and then you name the audience. That's how you replace you and your, is you name whoever. That's why when we write, we have to be aware of who our audience is, because then that determines whether we write in a casual tone of English or we write in a professional tone of English. So when I say you, know who that is. That's what you replace you and your with. If you can't replace your you and your, that means you're not aware of your audience, which makes you not a very good writer. Also, and the last, there's two more kinds of. My favorite conclusion paragraph is the full circle conclusion. A full circle conclusion picks up an idea or image suggested in the introduction, echoes it in the conclusion. Such a conclusion might also refer back to an anecdote or example mentioned previously and show how it is still relevant. Full circle conclusions provide a satisfying solution to the problem you have raised. So remember, in the dramatic entrance introduction, I talked about Betty making her commercial, right? And so Betty makes a commercial to warn her grandchildren that not to smoke. Okay, so that's basically the introduction to that. And then I don't mention yet that Betty passed away. So I would mention that in the conclusion. So that brings it full circle. Smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. We always start with the first sentence. We always start with the thesis statement. Then we would say, going back to Betty, shortly after she made her commercial, she passed away of lung cancer. Betty was glad she was able to get the message out about the dangers of smoking to her children and grandchildren. So she was worried her grandson, who had just started smoking, would end up like her. So she wanted her grandson to quit smoking. She hoped that seeing the commercial with her in it shortly before her death would convince her grandson to quit smoking earlier than she had. So here, if in your introduction you mention Betty, then in the conclusion you mention, well, what happened to Betty afterwards, that brings you full circle. So for a creative story, if you can manage to figure out how to integrate your title, whatever the title of your paper is, in your introduction and your conclusion, then you bring it full circle. A quotation conclusion. A quotation conclusion means that you can use a quirky quotation. So a quotation conclusion is a strategy for getting and keeping the reader's attention. Using this form of conclusion ends your essay uniquely and memorably. You can use factual quotations, quirky facts, unusual, or something funny. It's similar to how you would have different kinds of essay hooks. In other words, find something that's dramatic. Did you know that 50% of smokers can't even swim across the swimming pool if they're smoking, even if they're only 18 years old? So something surprising, so that's something that you would want to end to give closure, so that it brings home to the reader, don't smoke. And also, these are all not mutually exclusive. Most people mix and match. They put a little bit of a summary. In other words, most people's conclusions are a little bit of each. People put in a little bit of a summary, a little bit of a recommendation, a little bit of a prediction, some full circle, and then some quotation. If you know how to mix and match these different kinds of all of these, and that goes for the introduction. If you know how to mix and match the different kinds of introduction or body paragraphs, that makes your, and you use sentence variety, that makes your essay much more interesting for people to read. The only reason why I separated all the different kinds of conclusion paragraphs was for teaching purposes only. But in real life, people mix and match a little of all of this in order to really bring it home to the reader what they want. So if you're a business person, you're going to go with prediction, recommendation, and call to action. Okay? If you're an academic writer, you're going to use mainly summary and quotation. And if you're into literature, that's where people use full circle. Okay? In creative, but if you're a really good imaginative writer, you can, whatever you're writing, you can mix and match all of these. That's why it's always good to know different ways of writing, the introduction, conclusion. And yes, it was Marcel Proust in Remembrance of Things Past, in which he had one sentence for like 88 pages or something like that. That was the name of the novel. And what would happen if you wanted to write something longer than 5 paragraphs? I know I told you this in a previous essay, and I think that's it. And I think that's it for this entire. That should be it. Yeah, that's it for this entire lecture. Is what I remember of it. So how would we write something if we want? We could still use the 5-paragraph essay structure, but how would we do that if we want to write a 500-page book or a 20-page paper? How do we use the 5-paragraph essay structure for that?
Chapters, right?
Yes.
What about
So
what about
you
chapters?
three. No.
Yeah, you were right. You're on the right track. I just didn't let you finish saying it. Go ahead. What about chapters?
So instead of having a paragraph, like your body paragraph, you have chapter your body paragraph, if you will.
Yeah. So each of the body paragraphs then becomes a chapter. Your introduction will become the introduction chapter, which could be 100 pages, or not 100 pages, but the average book should be what? Less than 200 pages, because nobody reads that much anymore. It's more like 75 pages. I don't even think people read that much anymore either. You do because you have to study, but I mean, in your free time.
I like my sci-fi books.
Oh yeah, I love my sci-fi.
The Count of Monte Cristo every Christmas. So I mean,
it's true that the more you read, the better you write. You see, if you don't read, you don't know how to write very well, and so people who write less have much more trouble expressing themselves in writing, and people who read more. That's why I try to encourage my students to at least read one newspaper article or one magazine article per day, and try to read one book per month. You see, that way if you're an ESL student, that way you can learn more vocabulary, learn better sentence structure. You can emulate your favorite authors' sentence structures. You don't emulate their content, but you emulate their writing style. Like Charles Dickens has pages and pages and pages of description. So when you write something, you can use pages and pages and pages of your description. Ernest Hemingway was the opposite. No description, all dialogue. So therefore, you can write your story with just dialogue. That's what I mean by writing style. And in Europe, that's how they teach students how to write. This whole essay structure thing is so American, okay? In other countries, you would have already, well, anyway, that's another lecture. So this is my last lecture, and I want to say thank you for staying with me for the 12 weeks. And I will still use these lectures, even though it's a little bit outdated, because the next class, they have every single week, they're going to have a forum. So you got out lucky, in which this is the last class that has every other week forum, which has been the same thing for the last 2 years. So that means that for the next class, even if no one shows up, I have to make a new lecture, because there's another forum, and then another forum, and then another forum, and all the interactive lectures have probably also been changed. So that means I have to re-record all of that stuff. So that's why next class is not going to have a set of interactive. In other words, I'm going to create it as the class goes on. So they get it fresh, more or less. So all that old stuff. But I tell students that if they want to just learn about transition words, learn about their quizzes are the same, they could still watch the old stuff, but disregard the forums, because they still have the same forums, but they won't have 2468. So anyway, you don't have to know all of that. So congratulations on getting away with what was it? 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. Yay!
Yeah.
And obviously you get to, and then you graduate from this class, And I want to say it's been I've had a great time getting to know both of you, and congratulations. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Been a
don't
pleasure.
forget to
Being
fill
with
out
you.
your end of class surveys.
Did
Okay.
it.
All right. Okay. So have a great life. I remember that was what we all said when we graduated. Have a great life. And then we were young, so we didn't think anything of it. When you're young, it's also blasé. When you get older, you realize, and you treasure it more. So I will always have these videos to remember you by. And so have a great life. Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Useful. Thank you.
Okay. Have a great time.